Good day, everyone. I'm Miss Ella Amulong. Today, we're going to report the 18th century with my partner, Mr. Christian J. de la Cruz. So, at the end of the lesson, you are able to trace the history of the 18th century, familiarize with the different literary periods during the 18th century, acquaint with the different representative writers or works during the 18th century. Welcome to 18th century. According to Jonathan Swift, invention is the talent of youth and judgment of age. It strikes me that this may be one of the differences between youth and age. When we are young, we invent different futures for ourselves. When we are old, we invent different paths for others. So this is the introduction of the 18th century literature. The 18th century literature is dubbed as the age of reason and good sense, because the writers of this era are rebelled against the exaggerated style of Elizabeth period. Hence, this unit presents writers and canon works which deviated from the previous epoch. What could be introduced in this unit are the work of Swift, Pope, Gray, and Fielding. Credits are due to Encyclopedia Britannica 2020 and YouTube for being the source of this unit. As a means of recording the passage of time, the 18th century refers to the century that lasted from 1701 through 18,000 in the Gregorian calendar. The period is also known as the Century of Lights or the Century of Reason. In continental Europe, philosophers dream of a brighter age. During the 18th century, elements of Enlightenment thinking culminated in the American, French, and Haitian revolutions. During this century, slave trading and human trafficking expanded across the shores of the Atlantic, while declining in Russia, China, and Korea. The next writer is Laurence Sterne. Laurence Sterne was born on November 24, 1713 and died on March 18, 1768. He is an Anglo-Irish novelist and Anglican cleric who wrote the novels The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman, and A Sentimental Journey Through France and Italy, published sermons and memoirs, and indulged in local politics. He grew up in a military family, traveling mainly in Ireland, but briefly in England. An uncle paid for Sterne to attend Hyperholme Grammar School in the West Riding of Yorkshire, as Sterne's father was ordered to Jamaica, where he died of malaria some years later. He attended Jesus College, Cambridge on Caesarship, gaining bachelor's and master's degrees. Writer is Oliver Goldsmith. Oliver Goldsmith is born on November 10, 1728 and died on April 4, 1774. He is an Anglo-Irish novelist, playwright, dramatist, and poet. He is also best known for his novel The Vicar of Wakefield, 1766, his pastoral poem The Deserted Village, 1770, and his plays The Good-Natured Man, 1768, and She Stoops to Conquer, 1771. First performed in 1773, he is thought to have written the classic children's tale The History of Little Goody Two Shoes, 1765. The next writer is Henry Fielding. Henry Fielding is born on April 22, 1707 and died on October 8, 1754. He is an English novelist, irony writer, and dramatist known for earthy humor and satire. His comic novel Tom Jones is still widely appreciated. He and Samuel Richardson are seen as founders of the traditional English novel. He also holds a place in the history of law enforcement, having used his authority as a magistrate to found the Bow Street Runners, London's first intermittently funded full-time police force. Fielding was known for his humor and satire in his pieces as well as a penchant for establishing a wide variety of characters among varying social classes. His most successful novels were Joseph Andrews (1742) and Tom Jones (1749). He continued to write and publish his works until he died on October 8, 1754. One of his major contributions of the English novel was a sense of structure to its development. With his Tom Jones, Fielding introduced a new kind of fictional hero, a good-hearted, well-intentioned young man with ordinary human weakness, one who yields to temptation with women and to make errors in judgment. Thank you for listening. God bless.
This term was first applied to the works of Greek and Roman writers like Homer and Virgil. In the second place, in every national literature, there is a period when a large number of writers produce works of great merit. Such a period of age, for example, the reign of Augustus is called the classical age of Rome, and the age of Dante is called the classical age of Italian literature in the third place. During this period, the English writers rebelled against the exaggerated and fantastic style of writing prevalent during the Elizabeth and Puritan stage. They demanded that poetry, drama, and prose should follow exact rules. This century is also called the Age of Reason and Good Sense, because the people thought that they could stand on their own legs and be guided in the conduct of their affairs by the survey on English and American literature. Light of their own unclouded by respect for ancient precedent, they began to think that undue respect the authority of the ancients was a great source of error, and therefore in every matter man should apply his own reason and common sense. So, why is it called the 18th century the age of reason and good sense? Because the 18th century was essentially an age of reason and good sense. The individual initiatives in the fields of art, science, and social progress. It was a period of false appearance, of assured self-interest. The age emphasized rationalism, intellect, logic, and emotionalism, sentimentalism, enthusiasm, and even imagination. So next, there are representative writers and their works of English literature during 18th century. This part discusses the representative writers of the 18th century periods together with their works. To further recognize the various writers, kindly visit the links provided. So the first writer is Jonathan Swift. Who is Jonathan Swift? Jonathan Swift, born on November 30, 1667, died in Ireland on October 19, 1745. He is Anglo-Irish author who was the foremost period satirist in the English language. Jonathan Swift is best known for Gulliver's Travel, which is a parody of a travel narrative published in 1726. It mocks English customs and the politics of the day. Swift is also well known for A Modest Proposal, a satiric essay published in 1729 that suggests living conditions in Ireland could be improved by butchering the children of poor Irish citizens and selling them as food to wealthy English landlords. So, here are the Jonathan Swift works entitled Gulliver's Travel. Gulliver's Travel is a four-part prose travelogue narrated by the fictitious person of Lemuel Gulliver, who tells the story of his extensive global voyages, the places he has been, and the people and other creatures he met. This satire was first published in 1726 under the title of Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World by Lemuel Gulliver. Gulliver announces in a letter prefixed to the novel that he has only allowed his story to be published under great pressure, and he denies any suggestion that it is a mere fiction out of narrative we are about to read. Gulliver carries this fuzziness over into assessment of the various cultures and individuals he becomes acquainted with on his travels. Gulliver travels take him to Lilliput, an island on a miniature scale where he appears a huge, comparatively minuscule. The flying island of Laputa, inhabited by philosophers, the kingdom of Balnihabri. Of obsessive scientists, the island of Lilliput, where a magician enables him to speak with the ghosts of important figures from antiquity and the modern world, where he meets immortal and deeply unhappy. And finally, the country of Huaymen, a race of highly intelligent, refined, talking horses who rule over a British race of humanoid beasts known as Yahoos. Gulliver is so distressed by humanity's resemblance to the Yahoos that after he returns home from his final voyages, he becomes a recluse, barely able to go near his own wife and family. He is convinced that human beings are nothing more than a lump of deformity and diseases, both in body and mind, smeared with pride. This Gulliver Travels of Swift book is a statistical commentary on his own society's fascination with travels and exploration, riffing in particular on the previous optimist of Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, which had been published 7 years earlier. Gulliver is a surgeon and sea captain who visit remote regions of the world, and it describes 4 adventures. Gulliver is the only survivor of a shipwreck, and he swims to Lilliput. Next writer is Alexander Pope. Who is Alexander Pope? Alexander Pope, born on May 21, 1688, London, England, died May 30, 1744, Twickenham near London, poet and satirist of the English Augustan period, best known for his poems and essay criticism, The Rope of Luck in 1712 to 14. He is one of the most epigrammatic of all English authors. Here is the one work of Alexander Pope entitled The Rape of the Lock. The Rape of the Lock, and it is a mock epic in heroic couplets by Alex Pope. The first version, published in 1712, consisted the two cantos. The final version, published in 1714, was expanded to 5 cantos. Based on an actual incident and written to reconcile the families that had been estranged by it. The Rape of the Lock recounts the story of a young woman who has a lock of hair stolen by an ardent young man. Pope couches the trivia event in terms usually reserved for incidents of great moment, such as the quarrel between the Greeks and the Trojans. The poem marries a rich range of literary allusions or an ironic commentary on the contemporary social world, with a sense of suppressed energy threatening to break through the veneer of civilization. The Rape of the Lock and Other Poems. The most memorable work by Pope is this mock heroic poem, which diffused an actual incident between two aristocratic Catholic families who, under Test Act, were subject to harsh restrictions and penalties and non-Anglicians. Pope compared the situation to that of the world of the gods in mocking fashion. The Rape of the Lock was originally published anonymously in 1712. The next writer is Thomas Gray. So, who is Thomas Gray? Thomas Gray was born on December 26, 1716, died in London, July 30, 1771. Thomas Gray, born into a prosperous but unhappy home. Gray was the sole survivor of 12 children of harsh and violent father and long-suffering mother, who operated millionaire business. To educate him, a delicate and studious boy, he was sent to Eton 1725. At the age of 8, there he formed a quadruple alliance with 3 other boys who liked poetry and classics and disliked a rowdy sports and the Haggardian manners of the period. They were Horace Walpole, the son of the Prime Minister, the precocious poet Richard West, who was closest to Gray, and Thomas Ashton. The style of life Gray developed at Eton, devoted to quiet study, the pleasure of the imagination, and a few understanding friends, was to persist for the rest of his years. This is the one work of Thomas Gray entitled An Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. Was published in 1751. A meditation on unused human potential, the conditions of country life, and morality. An elegy written in a country churchyard is one of the best-known elegies in the language. It exhibits the gentle melancholy that is characteristic of the English poets of the Graveyard School of the 1740s and 50s. The poem contains some of the best-known lines of English literature, notably "Full many of a flower is born blush unseen," and "Far from the madding crowd's ignoble strife." The elegy opens with the narrator musing in a graveyard. At the close of the day, he speculates about obscure lives of the villagers who lie buried, and suggests that they may have been full of rich promise that was ultimately stunted by poverty or ignorance. The churchyard in the poem is believed to be flat of Stoke Poges, Buckinghamshire, which Gray visited often, and where lie now, when he now lies buried. And here is the additional information about Thomas Gray's An Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. It represents the omniscient speaker who talks to reader. He stands alone in a graveyard, deep in thought. While there, he thinks about the dead people buried there. Of the church in Stoke, pages in the speaker contemplates the end of human life through the poem. He remarked on the inevitability of death that every individual had to face. The speaker in the elegy reminds that all the people will die one day. Death is an unavoidable and natural thing in everyone's life. In this poem, Gray, the poet himself, writes the epitaph of his own, and the first, however, he feels proud of his knowledge. He calls it incomparable. His lines, "No one is perfect in this world."